as one continuous paragraph. Let me ask you something. What if the moment you reached the highest point of your career, the very next day the ground disappeared beneath your feet? That is exactly what happened to Alex Eala. And if you think this is just another tennis story, you haven't been paying attention. Because what unfolded over the span of a single week in the summer of 2026 was something so dramatic, so emotionally charged, that even people who had never watched a tennis match in their life found themselves glued to their screens, refreshing rankings pages, reading box scores, and learning the difference between a WTA 125 and a WTA 500. This is the story of a 21-year-old girl from Manila who climbed all the way to the edge of history, touched it with her fingertips, and then watched it slip away in the most stunning reversal the Philippine sports world had seen in years. And the most painful part? It all happened so fast. To understand how high she had climbed, you have to go back to June 7, 2026, Birmingham, England. Alex Eala stepped onto the grass at the WTA 125 Lexus Birmingham Open and did something she had never done on that surface before. She won. Not easily, not cleanly, but the way champions do it, digging herself out of a hole, dropping the first set, then flipping a switch and becoming a completely different player. She defeated Nicola Barcinova 5-7, 6-3, 7-5, and when the last ball landed, she was holding her second career WTA 125 title. The world number 33 from the Philippines had just captured her first grass court crown. It was a beautiful moment, the kind of win that made you sit back and think, okay, something is happening here. But Birmingham was just the opening act. The real story was still being written, and it was about to get a lot more interesting. A few days later, Eala arrived in Berlin as a wild card for the WTA 500 Berlin Open. Nobody had particularly high expectations. She was ranked 35th in the world, entering a field filled with players ranked inside the top 10, players who had won Grand Slams, players who had been at the top of the game for years. On paper, she was an outsider. On grass, in that particular week, she was something else entirely. In the round of 16, she walked out to face Elena Rybakina. Let that sink in for a second. World number 2. The woman who lifted the Wimbledon trophy in 2022. The reigning Australian Open champion. One of the most powerful servers in the history of women's tennis. Nobody gave Eala a realistic chance. And then she won. 5-7, 6-4. 2 sets, one massive statement. The tennis world did a double take. She followed that up in the quarterfinals with something equally jaw-dropping, dismantling world number 8 Alina Svitolina in just 1 hour and 23 minutes. 2 top 10 wins in a single tournament. Back-to-back. On grass. From a wild card. By the time Eala exited Berlin in the semi-finals, the conversation had changed entirely. She had collected 195 ranking points, boosted her total to 1,557, and moved from world number 35 all the way up to world number 30. But it wasn't even the ranking jump that made people lose their minds. It was what happened next. When Wimbledon released its provisional draw and world number 9 Victoria Mboko withdrew due to a knee injury, Eala moved up one more spot. She was now seeded 29th at Wimbledon. The first Filipino in the entire Open era to earn a singles seed at a Grand Slam tournament. A ceiling that had stood for decades, untouched, unreachable, suddenly shattered by a 21-year-old from Manila with a backhand that could cut through grass like a blade. The Philippines erupted. Social media filled overnight with the hashtag Laban Eala. News outlets that had never covered tennis before were running front-page stories. Families who didn't know the difference between a tiebreak and a double fault were celebrating in the streets. For one brief, electric moment, the whole country was watching the same screen, cheering for the same person, believing in the same dream. And then came June 23rd. The morning after the rankings confirmed her historic rise, Eala arrived at the TC Bad Homburg Open, a warm-up grass tournament on the outskirts of Frankfurt, for what should have been a confidence-building exercise before Wimbledon. Her opponent was Elise Mertens, a 30-year-old Belgian, ranked 24th in the world, a 10-time WTA champion and former doubles world number 1. A seasoned professional who had already beaten Eala twice before, once at the 2023 Jasmine Open in Tunisia, and again at the Madrid Open just 2 months earlier. In tennis terms, Mertens had Eala's number. But nobody wanted to think about that. Not on this day. Not after the week she had just had. And for a few games, it genuinely seemed like the fairy tale might continue. Eala burst out of the gate, broke Mertens in the 4th game, raced out to a 3-1 lead, and for a brief moment the crowd dared to believe. Then Mertens turned the page. The Belgian is exactly the kind of veteran who doesn't panic when she falls behind. She absorbed the pressure, found her rhythm, adjusted her tactics, and began hitting through Eala with the kind of controlled aggression that comes only from years of experience at the highest level. 5 consecutive games. First set to Mertens. The second set was more of the same. Mertens surged to 3-0, Eala clawed back to 3-1, then 4-2, saving 2 match points along the way with real fight and determination. But Mertens didn't waver. She closed it out 6-3, 6-3 in an hour and 24 minutes, and walked off the court with a 3-0 career head-to-head record against the young Filipina. The loss itself wasn't the story. Losses happen. Every player on the tour loses, even the best ones. What stung was the contrast. Just days earlier, Eala had been slicing apart Rybakina and Svitolina with fearless shot-making and relentless energy. Against Mertens, she looked a step slower, a touch flatter, like a phone that had been running at full brightness for too long and was finally starting to dim. And you couldn't really blame her. Think about what she had put her body through in the span of 1 month. Birmingham, then Queen's Club in London, where she had extended her grass court winning streak to 6 matches before being routed. 6-2, 6-2 by 18-year-old American Eva Liss in just 76 minutes. Then Berlin, with those 2 extraordinary wins and a deep run to the semifinals. Then Bad Homburg. 4 tournaments. Countless hours on grass courts. A body and a mind being asked to perform at an elite level day after day, with almost no recovery time in between. The early exit in Bad Homburg didn't just sting emotionally. It stung mathematically. In professional tennis, the ranking system is built around defending points from the previous year. You don't just earn points, you have to replace them. And Eala had been carrying a ticking clock all along. The 163 points she had earned at Eastbourne the previous year were due to expire. She had been dangerously close to losing enough ground that she would have fallen outside the seeding cutoff entirely. The Berlin run had saved her. Those 195 new points had replaced the expiring ones, pushed her to number 30, and earned her that historic seed. But now, with nothing coming out of Bad Homburg and the Berlin points already baked into her total, the math began to tilt the other direction. By the time the next WTA rankings were released, she had slipped back to number 35. In the span of just 2 weeks, she had gone from the highest moment of her career to fighting just to maintain her position in the top 35. The whiplash was genuinely dizzying. Online, fans were divided. Some were confused, wondering how someone who had just beaten the world number 2 could lose so completely to someone ranked 24th. Others pointed to the grueling schedule and argued she had simply run out of fuel. A few were harsher, questioning whether the Berlin highs had been a peak moment or a true reflection of her level. But the loudest voices were the loyal ones, the millions of Filipinos who had never once wavered, who reminded everyone that Alex Eala wasn't just a tennis player to them. She was something bigger, a symbol of what was possible when a Filipino girl from Manila refused to accept the limits that had always been drawn around her. One fan comment captured it perfectly. Her fans aren't just tennis fans, they're countrymen and women who support their own. And you know what? That's not a small thing. That matters. Because sport at its best isn't really about rankings or points or seedings. It's about the feeling of watching someone who looks like you, who grew up somewhere like where you grew up, step onto the biggest stages in the world and refuse to be intimidated. That's what Alex Eala had given the Philippines, and no first-round exit in a warm-up tournament could take that away. Still, the questions hung in the air as Wimbledon drew closer. Some analysts, trying to find the silver lining, pointed out that the early exit in Bad Homburg was actually a gift in disguise, a forced rest before the biggest 2 weeks of her life. 4 grass court tournaments in a month is a brutal load for any player, let alone a 21-year-old who was still learning how to manage the physical and psychological demands of competing at this level week after week. The early loss meant she would walk into Wimbledon with her body having had at least a few extra days to recover. And there was another thread to follow. In doubles at Bad Homburg, Eala was paired with Venus Williams. Venus Williams, 7-time Grand Slam singles champion, one of the most iconic figures in the history of the sport, a 46-year-old legend using Bad Homburg as her own Wimbledon tune-up. The idea of Eala sharing a court with someone like Venus, learning from her, feeding off her presence and experience, was the kind of thing that writers invent for sports movies. Whether that partnership gave Eala the confidence boost she needed going into Wimbledon remained to be seen. But the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Because here was the thing about Alex Eala that sometimes got buried under the rankings and the scorelines and the points calculations. She had already done something no Filipino had ever done. She had earned a seed at Wimbledon. She was guaranteed prize money. She was protected from the top 32 players in the opening rounds, meaning her draw was structured to give her a genuine path into the second week. The fall back to number 35 in the rankings had happened, yes. The back-to-back losses on grass had happened. The bad day in Bad Homburg had happened. But none of that erased the Berlin run. None of that erased Birmingham. None of that erased the moment when a girl from Manila looked at Elena Rybakina across the net and won. Champions don't stay down. They absorb the hit, they rest, they recalibrate, and then they walk back out onto the court with something to prove. That's precisely what made the weeks ahead so compelling to watch, because the entire Philippines was going to be watching, and Alex Eala had a long history of doing her best work when the weight of expectation was heaviest. So the real question wasn't whether she would recover. The real question was how far she would go once she did.